What's good, everybody? It's the Cloud with Cab Show. One of my favorite sports of all time is definitely poker, Texas Hold'em. If we look at poker in general, we go all the way back to the 60s and 70s, and look how much it's changed all the way up into now, 2025. We even go back to the early 2000s where it was like, bro, poker was just not the same as it is now. Everybody's a good player now. We have technology. We have Game Theory Optimal. We have all these different types of websites to really improve your poker game and to understand your opponents and tendencies, because what it boils down to, Texas Hold'em, it boils down to, is your opponent telling the truth? Are they lying to you? Do they really have pocket aces, or do they have the worst hand in Hold'em, 7-deuce offsuit? But poker, to me, it's really interesting. It's a dynamic game. It's understanding people, essentially. It's understanding your opponents. Do they like to lead out on flops where it's flush draws and straight draws out there? Or do they like to check big hands in position? You got to understand your opponents, but if you don't understand poker, it's really a game where you just dive face forward and hope for the best and just continue to improve your game each and every day. Because the day you stop improving in poker is the day that other players are going to get better than you. They're going to elevate over you, essentially. But we go back to the early 70s, 80s. We go back to the godfather of poker, Doyle Brunson, a legend, right? Doyle Brunson, the greatest, we looked at him back in the day, the greatest poker player of all time. But we look now in 2025, and there's kids right now that are like 18, 19 in the basement playing online poker that are seeing more hands than Doyle saw in his whole entire career. Because when Doyle Brunson came up playing poker, he came up in a weird time where it's like there was no online sites. There was no online poker. That didn't exist, bro. Like, none of that existed back when Doyle Brunson was playing back in the 70s and 80s. So, like, all this stuff now, with social media, with the internet in general, it's like you could get way better. You could see way more hands online poker than you can live. So essentially, we have kids now that are like 19, 20 that have seen more hands than Doyle Brunson's seen in his whole entire career, which is pretty crazy, right? But if you're playing online poker every single day, you're seeing so many hands every single day. So you're seeing situations where it brought up where it's like, is this guy bluffing in position here? He's on the button. He seems to have aces right here, but does he really? Is he lying to us? You got to dissect certain things like that. But understanding, poker is a position. It's a position game. If you have the button, it's a power game. So in theory, position is where you get to see all your opponents act before you can act, right? So like, say I'm on the button here and I don't have a good hand, right? But I can represent that I have a good hand. I can third bet you. I can fourth bet you. I can re-raise. I can represent an ace or a king on the flop. That's why the game's so beautiful, right? You can represent so many different things in poker where it's like sometimes your opponent will fold the best hand. So like that's why casinos win on slot machines, roulette, but they can't win in poker because you're playing against a player. You're playing each other. So like you're playing against a player and he can have aces and fold aces outright, right? But we go back to the early 2000s, right? And let's say the flop is 10-10-3, no flush draws. So the flop is 10-10-3, and you have pocket aces, right? And there's two players in the pot. In 2000, where the aces would bet, and let's say later position, let's say the guy does have a 10. Let's say he has Jack 10 offsuit, and he has trips, which is a great hand. He raises you. In early 2000s, the guy with the aces would go all in immediately. I'm all in. And then obviously the guy with the 10 who raised you on the flop is going to call you, and your aces are crushed. That was early 2000s play. So like, let's say the flop is 9-9-3 and you get raised with aces. In early 2000s, the pocket aces would shove all in immediately, and the guy with the 9 would snap you off. But nowadays, in 2025, nowadays you can make good folds. You can see good players that'll fold pocket aces or pocket kings after the flop because they know their opponent probably has that hand. And if they don't, then it's a good bluff. But obviously bluffing is part of poker. So many players have gotten bluffed, but if you never get bluff in poker, then you're not a good poker player. You're a calling station. You typically call more. You're just not good at poker then if you never get bluffed. That's the beauty of the game. You're going to get bluffed. You have to get bluffed in poker because if you never get bluffed, well, then the people who have the value hands, the good hands, the best hands, they're going to bet you, every single time, and you're going to call every single time with marginal one pair hands. So, like, that's what the huge difference, from all the way from 2000 up 25 years later up into this point. But we look at the money list, right? Because everybody in poker's all, it's all about the money, right? So in poker, the most money right now is Brian Kenny. Shout out to Brian Kenny, man. He's networked over $73 million in poker. I don't know if that's exact numbers, right? But Brian Kenny is a pro. He's a great player. He has great instincts for the game, and he's networked over $73 million, man. Shout out to Brian Kenny, man. That's crazy, dude. And Brian Kenny probably started playing poker back in like 2010 times. 2010, 2011 time is when Brian Kenny started to get on the poker scene. So, like, Brian Kenny's ran up a bag. So, shout out to Brian Kenny. And then, guys, number 4 money list is Jason Koon. Over $59 million Jason Koon has networked. Shout out to Jason Koon. I mean, aggressive style type of player. Just an amazing type of player. One of my favorite poker players of all time is Tom Dwan. And I think that's a lot of up-and-comers' favorite poker players, Tom Dwan. We look at Tom Dwan. He came on the scene back in like 2005 time, right? Before the internet really started to take off, before players started to get really good. Tom Dwan was a little just before that era where Tom Dwan was young and he would win these big pots. He was 22 winning $1 million pot, dude, with King, Queen of Spades. And we saw the crazy bluffs that Tom Dwan ran back in 2007, 2008 time to where people were like, bro, how is this guy doing this? Tom Dwan's bluffing these guys so much. It's crazy, right? But then you start to think, well, nowadays it's just like, it's not like that anymore. Like, players are good. Like, they're going to call you down now if they think they're bluffing. Like, you got to go with your instincts sometimes in poker. That's part of the game. You got to go with your instincts. If you cannot trust your gut, you're essentially going to lose. That's kind of a losing mindset. So you got to understand your instincts, understand your opponent's tendencies. But guys like Tom Dwan, is Tom Dwan the best poker player now? No. But was he back in like 2008, 2009, 2010? Yes. Tom Dwan was destroying everybody. Even guys, quote unquote, the greatest poker player of all time, Phil Hellmuth, the most bracelets of all time, Phil Hellmuth. He wins pots against Phil Hellmuth where it's like, holy cow. Phil Hellmuth's calling him with third pair, over $100,000 in the pot. So, like, that's crazy. But to be a good poker player, like one of the greats, Phil Ivey, said, he tries not to let a big pot affect him. Like, let's say you lose a big pot, you lose $200,000, $300,000 in one pot, right? Phil Ivey says, hey, I'm not going to try to let that affect me. Obviously, people go on tilt. And what tilt is basically where you really give no fucks anymore. And it's just like, hey, I'm just going to go all in. It doesn't matter. I'm playing bad. That's essentially what tilt is. You start to play bad. You start to call down where you shouldn't call. You start to play hands where you shouldn't be playing. You start to play hands where it's like 9-8 offsuit, where you shouldn't even be in the hand in this position whatsoever. So you'll even see pros go on tilt. But Phil Ivey said, I try not to let a big hand define my session, define my poker, and that's great. That's why Phil Ivey's one of the greatest poker players of all time, if not the greatest. Phil Ivey, Daniel Negreanu. We look at Daniel Negreanu. I mean, Daniel Negreanu first came on the scene back in like the later 90s, right? Obviously, he's been grinding in Vegas, but I think he won his first event in like 1998, and he was wearing a Nike jumpsuit. Daniel Negreanu, he arguably, to me, I think he's the best poker player that we've ever seen. I mean, he's been through it all. He's been through the early era, the mid-2000s era, and this era right now where Daniel Negreanu is continuing to win. And why I think Daniel Negreanu is the greatest poker player of all time is he can put guys on specific hands. It's essentially like Daniel Negreanu is like literally right behind you looking at your hole cards. It's basically playing with your cards face up. Like, that's how Daniel Negreanu plays against some of these, even pros. Daniel's really just taking him to school. Kid poker, now he's over past 40 now, so he's not a kid anymore. But Daniel Negreanu paved the way, man. He really did. And I kind of looked up to Daniel Negreanu like, man, how does he know that this guy has pocket nines here? He has a set. He has a bow. How does Daniel Negreanu understand these things, man? And it's amazing, man. It's a skill. Obviously, you're not always going to win in poker. That's the beauty of the game. Now, I can't go compete against LeBron James one-on-one, but LeBron can go, play at one session of poker and compete against Daniel Negreanu because that's just sometimes how poker is. Anybody can outplay anyone in poker. That's the beauty of the game. game, right? You don't have to be fast. You don't have to be strong. You don't have to be tall or short to play poker. That's the beauty of this game, man, is understanding your opponent's tendencies, man. It's great. And Daniel Negreanu's in the top 10 money list of all time. So shout out to Daniel Negreanu, man, but just the way that the games just change. And Doyle Brunson even said it back in the early 2000s is he understood that this game is going to change. With the internet, this game, people are only going to get better. People are going to be able to understand your tendencies. They're going to understand, do you like to bluff? Bluff big on the river and check on the turn and then bluff on the river. Do you like to lead out on draws more than you do on made hands, like out of position? But it's amazing, man. We look at the greats like Johnny Chan, right? I mean, shout out to Johnny Chan. He's the last player to win back-to-back WSOP bracelets back in 1987 and 88. World Series of Poker at the Mecca. You know, the $10,000 buy-in. Johnny Chan was the last to do it, man, back-to-back. And Johnny Chan, man, he's still going, but it's amazing. Even Johnny Chan back then, dude, like you had guys where he won. Obviously, Eric Seidel, he's on the all-time money list. Eric Seidel has 10 bracelets. Like, that is crazy. Shout out to Eric Seidel. It was a legendary hand where Johnny Chan flopped the nut straight. He had Jack 9. Eric Seidel had top pair. And it was amazing. It was just like watching art. And obviously, Johnny Chan with the made hand caught him down. And then Eric Seidel shoved the river. And then obviously, Johnny Chan called with the best hand. And he won that WSOP right there. And that changed Johnny Chan's whole life, right? It was just amazing, man. But just poker in general, it's really becoming a popular sport now. It is, because players understand, people who aren't good at poker understand, hey, man, like, I can practice at this. I can understand what game theory optimal is. I can understand that betting in this situation, in this spot right here, heads up, is the right play to do. I can't get exploited this way if I play the game theory optimal way whatsoever. But, you know, at the end of the day, you don't know what the turn of the river cards are going to be. You just don't. You really don't. It's amazing. And a lot of the time, especially with cash game and tournaments, obviously it's two different games, right? Tournaments, you have to play essentially, you know, your cards eventually, because you're going to get blinded out. The antes go up every 30 minutes. Whatever type of structure it is. But in cash games, I do think cash games are a little bit tougher, right? Because especially deep cash games. Say you got $100,000 sitting in front and you make a bet, $100,000 bluff this guy's making on you, and you call and say you lose the hand, and it's just like, well, how's that going to affect you? Do you have the bankroll to lose $100,000? Are you going to play a little different if you have a couple bullets? You really do. Like, if you have more bullets back in a cash game, you're going to play a little bit more aggressive. You can make more bluffs. You can make more moves in certain situations where you're like, well, I only have one bullet and I cannot make a bluff right here because this guy's prone to call. This guy is a billionaire. He doesn't care about the money. So he will call you down with one pair if he has to, because he's a billionaire and he has all the money. But what I'm saying with the skill-wise, that's what separates the good from the great, is the skill-wise. Like I said, what Daniel Negreanu can do, dude. Kid poker, man. I mean, he's amazing, man. We look at Daniel Negreanu, man. He's just a legend, man. He's a legend of the game. He understands players' tendencies, even the top pros. He can outplay them, you know, and that's just amazing of it. We go back to the, you know, 80s and 90s. Stu Unger. He had 5 bracelets, a.k.a. the comeback kid, Stu Unger. He won an 80, 81, and he won the 1997 WSOP bracelet. It's amazing, right? And then Stu Unger, I think he got in some, like, you know, drug problems and that and this, but it's amazing, man. And now we look at the new era of poker players. Guys like Phil Galfond, guys like Fedor Holtz. He's in the top 10 money list all time. Shout out to Fedor. Crazy, right? And then we go back to the early 2000s. You know, the Chris Moneymaker, you know, changed it. I truly believe if Chris Moneymaker did not win the 2003 WSOP, I don't think poker would be where it's at today. I really don't. Because when Chris Moneymaker won that, everybody was like, wow, dude, like, nobody knew who Chris Moneymaker was. Like, this guy was just off the street. He was an accountant. Like, they were like, dude, this guy is a bum. Like, this guy knows nothing about poker at that time. And to see an unknown win against all odds, everybody's like, wow, dude, like, if Chris Moneymaker can win a World Series of Poker, I can win a World Series of Poker. That's what the common player thought, was just like, man, I can do it if Chris Moneymaker can do it. But Chris Moneymaker came at the right time, where Chris Moneymaker would make big bluffs, and Chris Moneymaker would make a big call down and just understanding his instincts. You know, and Chris Moneymaker, when he won, he called a guy down with pocket threes. I think it was pocket threes or pocket fours, and like all the pairs beat him on the board, and he just thought he had two high cards, and he was right. That's what I'm saying. That's where the skill comes in, where your opponent's making a huge bluff on you. Are you willing to make a hero call with bottom pair? Are you willing to call with ace high and know that ace high is good? You will see that in cash games. You will see guys call people down with ace high or just immediately bottom pair, and sometimes be right. That's just part of the game. Like, that's the beauty of poker, is you can represent a flush, which is crazy, right? You can represent a flush. You can represent a full house as well. There's so many different theories that you can do in poker where you can outplay your opponent. But, you know, back then, man, it was just so different, man. It really was. Like I said, you can have pocket kings in the hole and the flop is jack, jack, blank, 3. Let's say the flop is jack, jack, 3, and your opponent check raises you, and you shove all in with the kings. That's probably not a good play, bro. He's telling you that he has a jack or nothing. Like, it's either he has a jack or he's running a bluff on you. Typically, he probably has a jack. And then the early 2000s, the king would go all in and get snapped off. That was the early 2000s way of poker, dude. The poker is not like that anymore whatsoever. Unless, you know, the guy's on tilt and he doesn't care and he's going to rebuy. But overall, man, this style of poker, man, guys are good now. Players are good. They understand position. They understand that, hey, this guy likes to lead out when he's 2 away from the button. He likes to do these type of things. He likes to lead out in big blind, you know, with these trash hands. So, like, you just got to understand that. And then, obviously, the Prince of Poker, shout to Scotty Nguyen, 5 bracelets all time, man. Scotty Nguyen, man, you know, it's amazing. He had one of the most iconic hands of all time. He's like, you call, it's going to be all over, baby. And the dude called him, and he won a bracelet. Just like that, man. But it's awesome. It really is. I love Hold'em because it's a game of people. It really is. It's understanding your opponent's tendencies. What do they like to do? Do they check on scary boards where there's 4 to a straight out there? Say that it's 7, 8, 9, and then the turn is a 10, and the river's a deuce, and the guy checks it down to you. Is he scared that you could have a 4 card do a straight? That you could have the straight card? You know, there's so many different theories that you could do, man. It's amazing. But and I think the new day and age of poker, especially the new game, which it really isn't new, but now it's really popular, is Omaha. Omaha is a crazy game. Instead, like Hold'em, you only get 2 cards in the hole, right? Well, in Omaha, you get 4 cards. Like that, it just spiced the whole game up. Pot limit Omaha, which you would think pot limit, oh, it's a small game. No, like this game could get crazy. You raise on say your first act, you raise 20, then the button pots it to like 80, and they all call. Now all of a sudden the pot's at like $400 or $500 here, okay? And you haven't even seen the flop yet. So pot limit Omaha, it's really crazy. It's a really different dynamic of game. I don't really truly understand pot limit like I do Hold'em, but pot limit, I just know that more money's involved in pot limit Omaha. The swings are way more heavy than in pot limit Omaha than in Hold'em, because there's just more variance in pot limit Omaha. You can flop top set in pot limit Omaha, and there'd be 2 hearts out there, and some guy has a nut flush draw, right? Let's say he has the ace hearts with the 3 hearts, and he's going to call you. He's going to call you on the flop. You guys get it all in. You guys are in for 10 grand a piece, and you haven't even seen the turn or river yet. Yet, you're ahead on the flop, but in pot limit Omaha, you do not have the best hand till the river. That's how it goes. Like, you can have the nuts on the flop, the best hand on the flop, top set, but it's not the best until the river. I mean, we could say that about Hold'em too, but the variance is way less risky in Hold'em. Like, if you flop top set and Hold'em, like, man, like, you're sitting nice. But in pot limit Omaha, it's like, dude, I got to dodge a lot of cards. The turn could be a straight card where it could change the whole dynamic of the game. Instead of me having top set on the turn and having the best hand, well, now a straight's out there. So, like, Jack 10 could be the best hand now. And they could very well have Jack 10 and Pot Limit Omaha. So Pot Limit Omaha is the game where, the swings are crazy, where it's just really taking off right now. It's amazing, dude. It is, dude. It's one of those games where Pot Limit, it's just like, if you don't have the bankroll to lose some money, do not play Pot Limit Omaha, because, you're going to get in situations where you are going to flop the best hand on the flop, which is 3 community cards on the flop, okay, and then the turn and then the river. So you get 3 cards on the flop, 1 on the turn and 1 on the river. And really, let's say you flop the best hand on the flop. That does not mean you're going to win this hand right now in PLO. It's just not how it goes. You essentially would have had the best hand on the river. No more cards are going to come out. You already know you had the best hand, because a lot of the times in Pot Limit, you flop the best hand on the flop. Well, hey, you're still not in the clear. Even though the percentages on the TV might say, yeah, you're 79% chance to win this hand. Well, that 1 card on the turn, boom, it's going to change your whole dynamic, dude. Now, all of a sudden, you're at 3 or 5, 10% to hit a boat, instead of this guy already has this straight and flush. So, like, it's amazing, man. But I love Hold'em, because Hold'em is one of the, like Doyle Brunson said, it's the Cadillac of poker. You could go all in at any time in Hold'em. You could go all in before the flop, before you even see the flop. You could go all in on the flop, the turn, of the river. It does not matter. You can put your opponent to the test. You really can. And Doyle Brunson said it best. When he plays cash games, he wants to have the highest money there. He wants to have the most chips, because he understands that I want to put my opponent to the test, right? I want to put my opponent, all right, say my opponent has top pair. Say the flop is king, 3, deuce, right? And he's representing a king, and you put this guy all in, right? For all of his chips. He's got all of his chips, but however, Doyle said, that's not all my chips. So if I lose this hand, I still have chips back. So I'm not worried about this. This guy has less chips than me. He's not going to hurt me whatsoever. Yeah, I might lose this hand, 15, 20% of my stack? Like that, so what? Like Doyle Brunson said, that's fine. Now, to the guy who doesn't have as many chips, it's going to be hard for you to call with top pair for everything, right? Where it's just like, man, if I'm wrong, I'm out of this game. I'm done. I don't have a bullet. That's it for me, dude. Like, that's how it goes sometimes in poker, but I love it, man. But the best Hold'em poker players, of this day and age right now in 2025, they are great because they have the ability to know if their opponent is super strong or super weak. What I mean by that is, say in position, like say I call from the big blind, right? I call from the big blind and the guy from the button raises. Essentially, when everybody folded out, but the guy from the button raises, his range is a little bit wider, because he could raise with anything on the button, because he knows everybody else folded before him. They all folded, and now he's on the button, so he could be raising with any 2 cards. Like, that's just how it goes. That's the power of position. He could raise with any 2. That's just how it goes. But understanding that, is my opponent super strong here or super weak? That's what separates the great Hold'em players from just the average Hold'em players that are just looking for luck, that are looking for pocket aces or pocket kings every time, because that's not how it works in cards. You're not going to win with pocket aces and pocket kings every time. Like, you could have pocket aces in the hole, and the guy calls you all in before the flop with pocket kings, and the guy hits a king on the turn of the river. You're going to lose. Like, you're going to sometimes lose with aces, like, right? Like, growing up, I thought you're never going to lose with pocket aces in the hole. You're just never going to do it, but you are. Like, pocket aces are not going to win every single hand, especially in PLO. Say in PLO you got pocket aces. Well, that's really not a good hand. It's not. Yeah, pre-flop is good, but typically in PLO you want to have cards like 9, 10, jack, queen, both suited. Like, that's what you want in PLO. You don't want pocket aces with 7 deuce offsuit. You just don't, dude. You want double suited connectors. You want cards that are straight and flush draws that can hit flops in PLO. But Hold'em, dude, pocket aces is great pre-flop, but you're not always going to win with aces. You got to understand that when you're a beginner poker player. It's just like, yeah, pocket aces are great. It's the cream of the crop. You want to get it in all in before the flop, right? That's the goal with aces. Like, you want to get raised. You want another player to go all in before you when you have aces, and then all of a sudden, yeah, you could shove all in and gladly, take your chances. Yeah, I'm like 75% chance to win this flop against 2 players all in. But typically, pocket aces and big flops, pocket aces and big pots, right? With multiple players, you really don't want multiple players with pocket aces. You just want one-on-one, everything on the line with pocket aces, because when you add the element of the third player, it kind of gets tricky there. Because they can call you with anything. Let's say they're a bad player and they go all in with 8-9 of spades. And they hit two pair, your aces are cracked. That's it. Your aces are done. But it's the cream of the crop. But like I said, man, the best hold'em players know if their opponents are super weak or super strong. They can understand that. They understand how you play. Essentially, it's like they're watching your cards. It's like they're behind you playing. When you look at your cards, it's like they're right there. They know what you have. They really do. We look at guys like Alex Foxton. Shout out to Alex Foxton, man. He used to be a college football player. He's won 3 bracelets already. And he got on the scene probably about 5 to 10 years ago. I would say about 5 to 6, 7 years ago. Alex Foxton come in. Now he's one of the best poker players right now in this day and age. Antonio Esfanari, he's one of the greatest poker players of all time. He's a guy that understands people's tendencies. He's a guy that could dissect and know the exact cards you are playing because how you played it. He understands that you don't have pocket aces or pocket kings pre because you would have third bet him. You would have re-raised his raise on top of that. He knows these things, man. These guys are just super good now. They're geeky. My whole thing is with poker nowadays is it becoming too robotic. That there's positives and negatives to it. Now, the negative part is, yes, I do think it could be a little bit robotic where players are taking too long in certain situations where it's like, bro, like, you shouldn't need 5 minutes in this spot, dude. Like, you're wasting everybody's time at the table. Like, you're bluffing, just fold your hand, bro, and move on to the next hand. Like, straight up. Like, I do think, nowadays, like, people are so smart where they're taking their time no matter what, where it's like, bro, you're slowing the game down. You got people, yelling at the dealer. The dealer has nothing to do with it, man. Like, that's crazy. Like, it's crazy, right? But I just think, yeah, in a way, it is becoming more like, robotic in a way where players are just like, just know, dude. They just know what you have, man. You got to have a different dynamic of the game. You got to mix your play up. You got to be willing to make a huge bluff on a great player. Like, if you're playing against a pro, you got to be willing to say, hey, man, like, I gotta go all in here. I'm making a play on this guy. I got to push the envelope. Because if not, these guys are going to, understand that you're the fish at the table. You're the weakest player at the table. They're going to attack you. That's how it goes. When I first started playing poker, I understood, man, dude, why am I always getting raised here? Like, why am I folding to these raises? Like, why am I playing soft? Like, you got to understand these things. Like, good players will understand, all right, this guy's on scared money. This guy's short bankroll. I'm going to exploit that, and I'm going to re-raise his raise before we even see the flop. So I'm going to make his decision even hard on the flop, even if the guy has ace-king and the flop's 9 high, and this guy's making a huge play on you, and you have a low pocket pair, right? Say you have pocket fours, and the flop is 9 high, and this guy with a lot of money, you third bet you, and then he puts you all in on the flop. What are you going to do with your little measly pocket fours? Like, are you going to call him and just hope for the best, or are you going to put him on ace-king? No, you're probably going to put him on queens or better, typically, right? But obviously, yeah, if you make that hero call, that's a great call. But you got to understand board texture. You got to understand positions. You got to understand that, hey, 5, 6, 7 flop is going to typically hit the small and big blind compared to what I'm trying to represent. If I raise from the cutoff, or early position, let's say I raise first to act. Typically, first to act is a good premium hand. Let's say I pocket jacks first to act with a good premium hand. And I get 3 callers. I get 1 caller on the button, and I get small and big blind to call, and the flop is 4, 5, 6. Okay, and these guys are leading out into me with pocket jacks. Yeah, I have a great overpair, but 4, 5, 6 connects way more with the small and big blind in that spot than it does in my spot. I'm first to act here, and I'm representing, a good hand, ace-king or better. I'm representing queens, kings, or aces, and I have jacks here, and these guys are leading out, and the guy re-raises. What do you do with the jacks? You should fold your jacks, typically. Understanding your opponents. This guy could easily, yes, the bluffs he could have is a top pair with a straight draw. He could have 6, 7. Flop is 4, 5, 6. He could have 6, 7. Yes, you're still ahead there, but you don't know that. You could think that, right? Yes, he could be bluffing there, but what if he has a set or 2 pair? What if he has pocket 5s and flops middle set there, and he's leading out with the sets? That's how you got to understand your opponents. He likes to lead out. He likes to do this in this spot. We've seen him before in the past. He likes to lead out when he flops a set or 2 pair or better, when he's out of position, because he doesn't like to play out of position, right? Who likes to play out of position? Not many players like to play out of position. This guy likes to bet out of position with strong hands. So you should fold your jacks or queens. Let's say you had aces in that spot. Are you going to make a great fold, a Class A fold, world-class fold, and say, you know what? This guy has two pair or better in this spot. I just know it. Or let's say the small blind bets, and then big blind re-raises, and you got aces in the hole. What do? Are you going to call the raise on top of what the guy bet? With just aces on a 4, 5, 6 flop? Like, I don't think so, bro. Like, these players are good now. Understanding the board textures. Let's say the flop is king 9-3 with two hearts. Okay, yes, he could. His bluffs in his range in that spot could be queen jack of hearts. He could have queen jack there, absolutely, and he could just be making a play and make the better hand fold. But overall, man, you just got to understand your opponents, man. Understand that, hey, this guy right here, he's just a rich guy. He likes to bet every single flop. Well, start to raise him. Start to check raise him. Even if you have nothing on a flop, check raise this guy because you've seen this rich guy bet every single flop, no matter what comes out in this spot. He's on the button. He's going to bet every single time on the flop. So check raise him. And the check raise is a beautiful thing. Like, the check raise back in, like, the 80s and 90s, dude, if you were to check raise somebody, like, they would probably shoot you. Like, back in the Doyle Brunson days, like, they would get mad at you. Like, you just check raise me? Like, how could you do that? Why would you check raise me on this flop, dude? Like, you check. Your check means weakness, right? And then all of a sudden you raise me when I bet the flop. That's crazy, right? Back in the 70s and 80s, they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to react. That's why I said they would go broke when they have aces or kings like that right there. So, like, man, you just got to understand how the game has just changed so much throughout the years. It's a beautiful type of game. But, like I said, at the end of the day, Texas Hold'em boils down to, is your opponent telling the truth? Are they lying to you? That's what it boils down to. Through all the third, fourth, fifth bets, all that stuff, are they telling the truth? Are they lying to you? Like, that's what it boils down to. And understanding your tendencies. What do they like to do? Is he super weak or super strong? Is he representing aces, which that is super strong hand? Or is he bluffing here, trying to represent like he's strong, but he's really weak? You know what I'm saying? But it's awesome, man. But, the GOATs of all time definitely in my list are definitely Daniel Negreanu, Phil Ivey, Doyle Brunson, Eric Seidel, Phil Hellmuth, Johnny Chan. All these guys, they paved the way for, the up-and-comers now, like Brian Kenny, over $73 million he's net worth. Shout out to Brian Kenny. Guys, the newcomers like Isaac Haxton, he's in the top 10 money list all time. These new players coming up, we kind of have it a little bit easy compared to how they had it back in the early 2000s when Phil Ivey and Daniel Negreanu came. They didn't have the technology. They didn't have all the GTO, game theory, optimal, what they can do in certain spots. They didn't have that, dude. They did not have any of that. So, like Tony G, those guys, they didn't have any of those things when they first came into the scene, man. Now, all of a sudden, the new poker player, we have all these tools. We have websites. We can pay monthly $50, $100 a month. We can hire a poker coach, what to do in certain spots. That's the evolution of poker. From the 70s all the way up to now. Could you imagine the players in the 70s competing against these guys right now in 2025? Dude, it's just day and night different now. It's just levels to this. It's similar to, like, the NBA, right? We look at the NBA players back in the 70s and 80s with Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, a young Michael Jordan. Like, those guys were great, right? But the athletes now in 2025, dude, the athletes were way better than the athletes they were back in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, you'd have a couple here and there athletes that could compete now. But I'm saying athletic ability, being able to jump, dunk on people, like, dude, the athletes are just crazier, better than they were in the 70s and 80s. Similar to poker. The poker players now are just better than they were in the 70s and 80s, man. We had guys just going crazy in the 70s and 80s, man. Like, it's amazing, man. But poker is a game of people, man. Understanding your opponent's tendencies, man. I love poker, man. It's the Clouded with Cam show. Let's go!